Boom. What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode. It's got Josh Marriner out there in Arizona. Dude, excited for the conversation. Can't wait to just chat it up. But before anything, always wild and funny story. What you got?
Yeah, so I told myself when I first left school, I went to school at the University of Connecticut, how I did not want to be in anything extreme when it came to the cold. So I ran far away from it, went back home, and was fortunate enough to go to Miami and live in paradise for a while. And as I transitioned from Miami, my wife said, "Wow, as we move, why can't we go somewhere like Arizona or Atlanta?" And ended up coming to Arizona. And when we got to Arizona, I thought it was going to be better, right?
Yeah.
And was thinking that this climate, I've been already in extreme cold conditions, that nothing can be worse. And my first summer in Arizona, we moved in the heat of the summer in August, and it's 120 degrees for about 30 days straight. And when I tell you that people in Arizona try to tell you that the dry heat is better than no heat or no humidity at all, it's a lie. It is a full-blown lie because 120 degrees anywhere, whether you have humidity or not, is too hot for you to be outside.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think, damn, and do y'all practice on turf or grass?
We practice some grass. So we're fortunate enough. Our stadium is inside. Our stadium is inside. Our training camp is inside. So we get to save our fans from the heat. We get to save our guys from the heat. We play about 3 weeks in our training camp in the stadium. So it's like fully air conditioned, good to go. Almost like that piece is great. Now to be outside 120 degrees here, it will be very, very hard for the guys and even just hard for the staff standing out there in the brute of the heat.
Yeah, I honestly, it'd probably be worse for the staff. Like just standing there roasting would be absolutely, at least they're like somewhat distracted if you're playing in it a little bit.
You won't know. It's so bad that when you're out here in Arizona, especially in the summertime, if you're sweating, your sweat evaporates. So when your sweat evaporates, you don't realize how dehydrated you're getting.
Damn.
And before you know it, you have a coach passing out, you have a staff member passing out because they didn't drink enough water that day.
How long, how long have you been out there?
So I moved out here and started with the team June 21st. Oh, not June 1st, June 1st of 2021. So now actually going on my fourth season, about to end up completing year three. So
Year three. Yeah. I love it, man. I love it. So take me on this journey. I want to know, like, I guess kind of for you personally, how did you get into like the leadership, personal development, player engagement? Because doing some stalking on LinkedIn, right? Like kind of just got like a gist of a little bit of the timeline. And so I'm always curious of just like kind of everyone's journey about like what was kind of the catalyst or like the kickstart that's like, oh damn, like I can like make a difference. Like I
yeah.
can get paid to do that.
Yeah, that did not getting paid to do that did not come till later down the road. Did not realize it. Honestly, when I'll say I go back to me even choosing the college I was going to. So I chose the University of Connecticut to play college football there.
And where are you originally from?
I'm originally born and raised Chesapeake, Virginia. So born and
Okay,
raised
yeah.
Chesapeake, Virginia. Majority of my family has never left. One of my older brothers ended up going to North Carolina A&T, so he was the first to kind of get away. But North Carolina is really just a hop and skip away. So it's
Yeah.
not far. We can get our car and we can drive. So in high school, I knew that I wanted to become a well-rounded individual. I love football. I love track. And so I love sport, but I also wanted to educate myself outside of it. So UConn happened to be one of the schools that first ran the ball because I played running back at the time. And then second, that they had a top 20 university when it came to education. So ended up going to UConn and knew kind of when I got there, I wanted to expose myself to everything outside of the game while focusing
Yeah.
on the game. So did what I could do from an academic standpoint to get out of study hall as quick as possible. Study hall was somebody holding you in that room just to tell you to study. I was like,
Hostage.
but I had to learn how to build the trust of my academic advisor, build some trust with him,
Yeah.
so I could get out. So once I was able to get out of study hall, I kind of explored what was like being just a regular student on campus, right? And I think that's really when my journey started. I was able to get connected with a professor at UConn who really talked about holistic development. And that's when I say I first got started with it. Working with Dr. Joseph Cooper at UConn, he was a professor in sports management, and he was just educating us as athletes to realize that, we have a window for our sport. And during that window, we also have access to so many different resources that the average person doesn't have. And so for me, it was taking advantage of those resources while I was a student athlete, and ended up starting an organization called Collective Uplift while I was in school at UConn with a few teammates of mine. So Collective Uplift focused on the holistic development of minority student athletes at a PWI, and then we kind of opened it up because there were more people who even didn't look like us that still could learn from some of
Yeah.
the. So I ended up started Collective Uplift in 2014, and then ended up graduating from UConn in 2016. Still had 2 years of eligibility, and decided to go down to Old Dominion University, where I'm from, born and raised in Chester, Virginia. Norfolk, Virginia is about 15 minutes away, and decided to start another chapter of Collective Uplift. So during this entire, like what I say, athlete development, human development journey in college, I did not think this was a job. I was getting my master's in public administration.
Yeah.
And I was about to go back home and either work in my father's church long term or even work my way up in the city that I had. Dreams and aspirations at a point in time to be a city manager, to help revitalize the city, to help lead people in the right direction, and to put together different programs and initiatives for the community. And so that's what I was studying in school. Did not think that player development, player engagement. Honestly, when I was coming up, we didn't even have player development at UConn at the time.
That's
So
what I was gonna say. It's like it feels like it's like over the last like five, and you'll know better than me, but it feels like over like the last like few years, it's like it's really caught fire.
yes, yes. And I appreciate NIL. I appreciate the transfer portal. I appreciate the new age athletics because it's been needed for the last 20 plus years. But I
Right.
think now with the resources being put into athletics, I think people are now starting to realize like we have to educate our students, right? Student athletes, but we have to educate our athletes about what's really out there. So for me, I know that the leagues have had it and it's changed over the years. It was player affairs and then player programs to player development to then player engagement of what people are calling it now. For
Yeah.
me, it's about how do we take care of the individuals that walk in our building and then how do we help them leave better than they came. So for me, that's what I cared about. And was fortunate enough when I was at Old Dominion to have director of student athlete development come the first semester I was there in school. So his name was Lamar Pottinger. I call him a trailblazer. He is a
Yeah.
trailblazer in his own. He has helped so many different individuals to just get into this industry, but also to just learn more about who they are and to then find their own passions and find the ways to get the skills to then follow those passions as well. So I've been fortunate enough to, I guess, not just surround myself, but been blessed to come into contact with these individuals and then get genuine, authentic relationships along the way for me to get to the next right step. And that's really what it is. I did not have my sights set on the NFL when I got done playing. Once I got done playing, I thought that was it for football. I thought maybe I could be a high school coach and volunteer from time to time, but NFL was not in my mirror, not in my front group mirror, not in my rearview mirror. It was nowhere near what I thought I could be doing. So ended up though, when I got done playing, because I was involved in student athlete advisory committee, because I was working with the athletic department already, just trying to bridge the gap between our football team and athletics and academics. I got offered the opportunity to intern there in student athlete development. So I went on part time for a whole year, not even fully a whole year, really about 10 months. And then was working full time in leadership development at my father's church. So I was already had a full time job, and for me, I just wanted to get good at the craft. I want to get
Yeah.
good at the craft of connecting with people, developing people, helping people to work to develop themselves. So I'm a big believer in like I can help people put together plans, but they have to own it and they have to take their own actions in order for them to grow. Right. I'm not the reason why they grow. I'm maybe just a source of information that has allowed them to grow.
Hmm.
And so with that being said, for about 9 months working two full-time jobs, basically, Lamar ended up actually leaving me. He hired me and then left me within a month and a half. But it was for better and great things for him. He went to Texas Tech at the time to help build out their leadership development department for their student athletes. And so it was a promotion for him, and I was happy for him. And honestly, I learned a lot because I got birthed by the fire that year when he left.
Yeah.
Was able to kind of learn what it looked like to run a student athlete development program, working with Reagan Hill. She was our academic affairs. She was in charge of all of our academic affairs, and she kind of just let me run with it. She said, "Look, you know what it is. You know what this looks like. You've done this. You're mature. Let me know when you need my help."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Let me know when you need my help. So I got tasked with a lot in my first 9 months of being right out of college, between balancing that job and then balancing, leading ministries at the church. And for me, it was everything working together. To then all of a sudden, for this one day, I get a call from Caleb Thornhill at the Miami Dolphins to then come down there and intern for player engagement. And honestly, it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me because I didn't have a dream about it, but I just knew I wanted to put my head down and do the work. And it
Yeah.
happened to be that the work that I was doing had aligned itself up to this opportunity. And so I can kind of stop there. It's like really just always focused on preparing myself and focusing on the craft that when the opportunity did present itself, I was ready to go. And that's
Yeah.
really
What was the connection there? Like, how did he know to like reach out to you? Were you guys like acquaintances, friends prior to that?
no, not at all. So Caleb actually did speak to our football team back in 2017. Uh,
Oh.
and I was terrible at networking in college. I'm gonna keep
Yeah.
I know people will go on LinkedIn and tell you network, network, network. I am not that individual. I am the individual that goes and actually just works. And so for me, it was about working and serving, working and serving, working and serving in everything that I did. So how could I work? How could I serve the people that I was around? Like I said, I was around so many people that genuinely cared for people,
Yeah.
between my father and his church and leaders that we had, to Reagan Hill, to Lamar, to Dr. Joseph Cooper, all of these things. For me, it was just how can I serve the people that I met? And so Lamar and Caleb actually had a relationship that I didn't know
Mhm.
went to that extent. And so when Lamar was still away, he ended up saying, "Hey, I know I haven't, I know you're not, I know I'm not there right now, but I still got you. Send me your resume." And so I sent him my resume, wasn't sure what that meant, right?
Yeah.
And he was like, "Be ready for a call." And so later on, he sent me a job description and said, "Would you be interested in this?" Kind of took a while, but he said, "Would you be interested in this position?" And I was like, I kind of got to figure this out. Like, I got a full-time job now. Like, I'm good. I'm like, I don't necessarily need to leave where I'm at.
Right.
I'm with my family. I had a nephew at the time. His name is Maverick. So I was loving up on him, being around my brothers. So I was in a great place, being around family, being around my community, being around my school that I played at. So for me, I was in a really, really good place. Like I was joyful. What I would say. Still young, still was looking to try to figure out what was my next right step, but wasn't necessarily thinking about leaving Virginia.
Right.
But ended up getting a call from Lamar, him sending the resume to Caleb, Caleb reaching out a few days later, and I just talked to Caleb when we talked on the phone, we hit it off. And I know it seemed like it was an interview for me, but honestly, like I appreciated everything that he did as a man to develop people. Like he talks about, yeah, he was a director of player engagement for the Miami Dolphins, but he wanted to develop men, not players, right?
Right.
They are players, that is their profession, but it's how do we develop the men? How do we develop the women, right? Because he even developed people that were around him that weren't players.
Yeah.
So I saw that. I saw the innovation that he was doing down in Miami with the Dolphins Business Combine. I saw how strong he was leading with his faith. And then for me, the biggest pull was when I did interview, and I was doing some research on him. That I saw the type of family that he had and the type of husband and father that he was, while being in a high results, a high demanding and results based industry. And so ended up going through the interview process, and each step through the interview process, I was like, ooh, I told my dad this. I said, "Dad, if I interview for this job, I'm getting it and I don't know what I'm going to do." I was a little bit nervous. I was 22 years old at the time. And so I was nervous I left home already. And like I said, I was in a good place. But I did know when I interviewed, it was just like everything had came to
Yeah.
this moment, right?
Yeah.
Between the work at the church, between me working in student athletic development, I was able to get skills from different industries that then merged into this one position. And ultimately, ended up going through the second round of the interview, and he asked me to pull up a presentation. And this is when I knew I was like, okay, I can really get this job. I pulled up a presentation. It was on emotional intelligence. And he was like, who created this presentation? I said, I did. He said, who designed the presentation? And I was like, I did. He said, no, you designed this and created this. I said, yeah. I said, in order for you to connect with the audience, you have to be visually appealing, but also understand the content. And so for me, I think emotional intelligence is something that most student athletes need to understand that they need just in life, not just as athletes, but as people, right?
Yeah.
It's not a topic that we're always talking about, at least at the time. This is 2019, right? And so, and then for me, from a graphic design standpoint, I remember when I was in college and I had professors that would show me black and white presentations and I just clock out.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I don't want to do that. And so you saw I actually do some funny stories. Like for me, even as a student, like when I saw people who do magnificent events and parties and just things that drew people in, they had great presentations and marketing materials. And so that's
Yeah.
how I looked at it. I'm a football player. That we're going to some parties. We're going to go connect. I'm seeing different events and I'm seeing like just the deliverables that they have from their graphic design standpoint. So I say, let me teach myself graphic design. So anytime I need it, I can go ahead and just build it myself. And so that literally through that presentation, through that interview, I was able to get to the last round. And after that, I was like, okay, I just know what I need to do to kind of close the deal. And ended up going through that interview process, met with the coaching staff, met with the GM, And for me, when I met with all those people, I was like, I'm supposed to be here.
Game over.
Game over. And it was hard because I did have to make a decision to leave my family, to leave even the school that I loved. But it was to go and actually grow as an individual, to leave a full-time job with benefits at that age. And I was like, you know what? I got some time. Let me go learn. It's not about me being in charge and not me having power, but how can I continue to learn? How can I go and continue to surround myself with somebody who's done it at such a high level in an industry like this? And that's what I decided to do in 2019. And I could tell you right now, in 2019, I did not think I'd be where I'm at today, 5 years later.
What's funny is even you got a little like entrepreneur in your blood too, is oh gosh, this would have been 2016, 2017. Is I went to Tony Robbins' Business Mastery event. And I'll never forget, is like on the first day, he was just like, anybody that tells you to write a 5 year, I think it was like 3 to 5 year business plan, he's like, they're idiots. He was like, because how many of you thought 3 years ago you'd be exactly where you are right now? He's like, you're probably way ahead. You probably put your head down and you did the things. And so it was this concept of like you're saying of like, okay, like how do I work and how do I serve right now? How do I build value for myself so that I can serve those around me? And that's going to propel you further than writing some business plan down 5 years. Now, yes, you do need clarity, you need a dream, you need some kind of like direction.
Yeah,
But at the same time, is like writing a bunch of words on paper, and like you said, is like you'll sell yourself short,
yeah,
honestly, you know. And
yeah,
so, yeah, it's fascinating. I want to go back to the like emotional intelligence side of things too, because that I think that like hits home like with me and like the teams that like I'm around. And so I'm curious because I think a lot of people in the industry miss the boat in what you said, that you understand something as simple as the way that you put together a presentation, i.e. infographics or color, or is there moving graphics, right? To like to draw people in, because I'm the same way, except for slightly different in the sense of like every time I come in is like I play a game with the team, right? It lasts 60 seconds, but it's like all of a sudden the guard lets down. They're like, all right, dude, like this guy's legit. Like this is actually a little bit of fun versus somebody that comes in with the black and white and it's like, all right, get your pens and your paper out. And it's like, oh damn, dude, like another lecture. So I'm curious of like how did you start to like put those puzzle pieces together? Because to me, that's connection, right? And that's
yes,
like 90+% of like what you do from a foundational level is building those connections. So how
yes.
did you start to navigate those, especially when you got into the world of professional athletics, to where it's like, you know way better than me, is like when you walk in a room, especially for the first time, it's like, are they going to snub their nose up at this? Or like, how do I capture their attention like immediately to draw them in?
Yeah. So I truly don't remember who told me this, but I heard it in college, right? And this was the quote is nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. And so for some reason, that quote stuck with me so much because I will just remember when people will come in and they will be experts, but they never connected.
Yeah.
So even if I go into a classroom full of 300, I had professors that could connect with 300 students at the same time because of how they opened up, how they decided to then first, I guess, present the material, right?
Yeah.
Versus some professors that just hop straight into it and just give you the information and they say, well, you're supposed to learn it, right? And so for me, that connection, that charisma wasn't there. And I'm also blessed. I grew up in a church household. So my dad's a pastor. I was introverted by nature. Introverted by nature, though. Me and my family, we say we're introverts, and now we get into positions where we have extroverted spirits. But for me, I think when I realized how important it is just to connect with people first before you get into the information, and that it's so many different ways to connect. And so I would sit back and I would say, well, what didn't I like as a student? What didn't I like as a kid?
Yeah.
What can I fix, right? What can I do? And then from there, I think I was able to be around some good people who allow me to understand, like a simple thing is an iceberg. You talk about playing a game, right? But you have to break the ice in every audience, right? You have to figure out a way to break it, whether it's through storytelling, whether it's through a game, whether it is through great questions asking at the beginning, right? You have to find a way to connect with your audience before you get into the information. And so whether I was going to school or whether I was going to conferences, I always looked at, well, who are the great speakers, right?
Yeah.
Are they the ones that are always the experts on the material? No. they're the ones that have learned how to truly communicate the message and communicating it through different mediums and modes. And sometimes that medium and that mode of doing it is not may not be verbal. It may be through a game to get people to understand the importance of like getting outside of their comfort zone and getting up and getting moving. So I was fortunate enough, I would say, and we joke around like when I was in college at UConn, I got my bachelor's in communications. And that was not something I came and wanted to do. I wanted to be an allied health major. I was thinking about going into the public health industry, and so still working in the public sector. I always wanted to serve and give back. But then with football, sometimes unfortunately classes and labs don't align at the same time.
Yeah.
So just studying communication, studying the art of communication back in undergrad, and I started to realize like some of my professors were really giving good information. And the ones that were giving good information about communication were the ones that could hold a room with college students who really just kind of signed up to take this class just so it could be easy, right? And I'm like, no, they're actually doing something that
Yeah.
they're actually doing something that's really relevant and being able to connect with you with the information. And so I will take just bits and pieces of people who really did a great job speaking, people who did a really great job teaching, because I think that's more than just speaking, it's also teaching it and getting people to have their own revelation through when you're teaching and speaking as well. So through watching all of that, I came across emotional intelligence for the first time, right?
Yeah.
And I remember writing a paper on leadership, and then I saw emotional intelligence, and then all of a sudden I read the Emotional Intelligence 2.0, cut off all my social media. Like for literally just a week and a half, I read this book on my phone. So anytime I thought about going to social, I read Emotional Intelligence, and it changed my life. Like when I say it changed my life, it changed how I saw myself. It changed how I dealt with certain adversity, but it also changed how I saw people, right? Like I realized that before I even go and try to tell somebody to do something or connect with somebody, I got to make sure what is the current state of mind that they're in. Because they're
Mm-hmm.
not in the right state of mind to ingest this information, then it's a whole different problem that we got to deal with anyway. So I can go on and on about this. I just think when it comes to connecting with people and being a leader, we're talking about leadership or being a person who is in this role, you have to be great in EQ. Like you have to.
Yeah.
I truly believe that.
Yeah. It makes me think of too is so predominantly like I'm around like college teams and like when I go in there, I'm like, what's the number one emotion that you feel like every single day? What's your primary emotion? And in some form or fashion, right? It's stress, worry, anxiety, and feeling overwhelmed. And I was like, isn't that funny though? Because everyone told you that college is supposed to be and they go, the time of my life. And I go, yes, and you feel overwhelmed, right? And so I get them, like you're saying, is like I resonate with you. And so it's like, let's tackle that first so that we can work on the performance side of things.
Yes.
Because if we just go to the performance side of things, you're just going to continue to get more and more overwhelmed. And the bigger your name gets and the more money you make now in NIL and now
Yeah.
that you're all over social media and everything, it's like that, it's only going to get worse from there. And so, like you're saying, if you don't know how to handle the emotional side of things, then like, that's why people are depressed. Like, let's be real.
And I mean, if we want to really be real about it, it's like we're human beings, right? So we are feeling beings. And
Yes.
so even though we're top performers, even though people can compartmentalize, at the end of the day, no matter how many strategies we put into place, we still have feelings. And unfortunately, especially in this industry, especially in football for a period of time, I think things are changing. I think it's been a big shift, especially over the last 6 to 7 years, when people have been able to talk about mental health and really just being able to be vulnerable, but be able to find strength through vulnerability. We are still feeling beings. Oftentimes people play this game of football because it's something that they felt and say, you know what, this is allows me to then go out and take out my aggression or take out my feelings on the field in a way that is legal. Let's be real. Like
Yeah.
we
Yeah. Yeah.
anytime you go out and see a football game, you go do that in public, you're going to
Yeah. 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 It's like wrestling's my background. It's like I'm like it's a fight with rules, right? Like it's
Yes,
essentially what it is, and that's kind of the same thing out there. It's a battle with rules.
yes. And I always say, like, I sat down when I got done playing football in 2018, well, 2017. My last season was 2017, graduated 2018. I got down and I wrote down every lesson I could learn from football. And even when it came to emotions, if you let your emotions if you overreact in the football game, you get penalties. You
Right.
might lose the game, right? And so emotions are still part of the game, but you need to learn how to control them and to navigate them throughout the course of the game. I take that same lesson and say, let's apply it to life. Emotions will come up. You're gonna have days that it's gonna be hard days, right? You still gotta address what you're dealing with, but you may still have to show up, right? But if you don't address it at all as a team, if coach never stops the team from fighting at practice and says, you know what, let's stop this, let's address what's going on, why are we feeling this, and then let's move past it, then you don't actually know what to put in place in order to grow through the emotion, in order to handle it, and not to just dismiss it. Because the more you dismiss it, the more it boils up and the more you cause problems. It causes problems in culture. And when we say culture, it causes problems in attitudes, behaviors, and actions. Let's be real.
Yeah. 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 No, totally. It makes me, because I feel like too many people, like, I love that you say like we're feeling beings, right? Like that's like at our core. Or what was the phrase
Yeah.
that you use? Is that
We're
feeling being?
feeling beings.
Yeah, feeling beings. Because I think a large part of the same like message that I share is I always ask everybody, and there's a book out there. I believe his name's are you familiar with Dr. Stephen Peters?
No, I'm not, but expose.
Yeah. He's got some really good stuff because I'm a big thoughts and feelings. And so it's like I try to help people understand, because I think that there's like this misinformation of like just being positive thinking, right? Like if I just think positive, then like everyone right. And so he's got like some good like data on it. And so I'm like, yes, thoughts are important. I said, but your feelings. And I was like, how many times have you, let's take a lot of the teams I've like worked with are like gymnastics teams. Let's say if you walk up to the beam and you feel stressed, how many times have you gone like, you got this, you got this, you got this, but you're still about to shit your pants, right? Like the whole positive thinking thing didn't work. Why? Because your feelings overrode like what you were trying to experience in that moment. And so he's got the data. It's essentially, he says in his research that your feelings are 5 times more powerful than any thought that you think. And so it's like, again, kind of a statistic that I can use to your point of like why hardwiring those feelings are so freaking important. And we just get addicted to being stressed and overwhelmed. And then next thing you know is like most people in life, they just kind of assume like, well, I guess this is just the way life is, right? Like I'm just supposed to be stressed. Everyone said if you're an entrepreneur, you're just going to be stressed, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And it's like there has to be another way. There has to be other ways.
Yeah. And for me, like what another book that I read that also helped change my perspective and really kind of changed my life before I even read Emotional Intelligence, it's called The Choice Theory by Glassman. And so for me, choice theory talks about that we all, especially as human beings, have the opportunity and ability to choose our predicament, to choose the
Mm,
relationship that we have. And
mm,
sometimes we take that, we don't take that perspective. And so we become victims to what has happened to us in our life. And I'm not saying that things don't happen to people, because people are, but you don't have to stay a victim, right? You also get to
correct.
choose to also be a conqueror. You also get to choose to realize you're a survivor. You also get to choose that you also literally conquer and overcame the test or whatever challenge, right? But when you were overcoming those challenges, you still were able to address those with feelings. And
Yeah.
so when I was thinking about choice theory and also emotional intelligence, I started to realize that it's a shift, especially human behavior, because human behavior, our natural instincts are to react. Our
Hmm.
reactions are real, but we also are humans that also we also have a chance to now be able to respond. And
Hmm.
so going from reacting to responding allows us to grow as individuals. It's not ignoring our emotions. It's not ignoring our thoughts. It's realizing that both of these things can be true. And how do we set ourselves up to respond in a way that best serves us and the people around us?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes when we react, we're just trying to be in survival mode. Survival mode isn't the same as thriving.
Yeah, yeah. I love that as the analogy I use, because I feel like so many people get caught in that victim mentality of like, yeah, there's two choices. You can be a victim or you can be a creator, right? Like, and you get to choose, right? Like you said, there are things that do happen, but you don't have to live there. You don't have to spend the rest of your life there. And I think that's what one of the big things is. I think early on, I think it was Tony Robbins that said this too. It was like, just the concept of, everyone assumes that he's like, everyone looks at me and thinks that I'm just like this. Like, I don't have bad days or I don't get overwhelmed. And he's like, no, I feel those. I just choose not to live in those. Right. And
Mhm.
so he's like, I had to learn that, like, maybe it overtook a day or a week. And he's like, I had to knock it down to 3 days instead of a week, right? Like you have to train. It's just like lifting weights or anything else. Like you have to train yourself. But I think people get frustrated. Because it's kind of like prayer or meditation, right? Like somebody gets exposed to it and they're like, dude, I prayed twice and nothing happened. I'm like, I don't think that's the way it works, bro.
Yeah. Still gotta go walk it out. You still gotta go walk it out. I'm a believer. So God and like Jesus Christ for me is like I've learned so much through my faith. And like really people say faith without works is dead. Because yes, if you truly believe, you will go out there and actually do the work as well. You do the work for whether it is internal or external work, that whatever needs to be done. It's not gonna be easy. It's no easy way to do hard things though. And
Right.
so with that being said, you still got to show up and do it each and every day. And I love that I get to work within athletics now because at the point in time, it's like, I think it's so many things that these guys, especially as being elite level football players, that their realm of influence and their realm of impact, if these guys get it, they can then inspire other individuals to get it as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Go into the faith rabbit hole of like you have to be that person, right? Like it's not something that you go spend an hour on Sunday and do or Wednesday at youth group or whatever. How much I asked somebody this the other day and I'm kind of curious your thoughts on this is like how much do you think there's a disconnect with a lot of people with that? Because I feel like I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think how to say it. It's like maybe I'm just around the wrong people, right? Like, or maybe I'm just exposed to the wrong people. Of like, there's a lot of people that are like, like you shouldn't judge, and then they're like, well, Ryan, you cuss, and so I can't hang out with you. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's judging, right? Like
yeah.
that's like judging 101, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so it's like I'm curious of like how much, and even if it's in career or just like people in your life of like do you have to remind obviously yourself too of like I have to be that person, right? Like Jesus hung out with like the prostitutes and
Yes.
like those people, right? And so it's like but everyone like almost shames you if like you don't match like their ideal thing. And I'm just like, I don't know, like there's just so much confusion around of like when I get around not everybody, but like certain people like within that are spiritually or faith or Christian or like whatever their religion is.
This is a long conversation. I think it goes back to being versus righteous or versus self righteous, right? And I
Explain
think
the difference.
so. Righteousness is being able to live the way that God has called us to. Self righteousness is living to our standard of what we think is right.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha.
And so we sometimes get to a place of judging because now we are feeling like we are perfect, not realizing that 20
Mm-hmm.
years ago we were not the same person. So
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes people forget where they come from,
Yeah.
forget the things that they were once doing, and now that they are no longer doing it, they want to say, "Well, that's great," but it's like, hold up, before you were even a believer, what were you doing? It
Mm.
doesn't mean you were perfect. It doesn't mean that you were the worst person in the world, but it was something. Each one of us was not perfect. It was only one that was perfect.
Yeah.
No longer here right now. He'll come
Yeah.
back. But so for me, as I walk through it, I think working in the church has showed me a lot. Like working in the church, and then even working at certain schools as well. Even at Power Five schools, they think they're better than everybody else.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like it's the same product, just different resources sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And so I think people just try to get to a place where they let status and power consume them. And status by doesn't necessarily mean that you're the president of the United States, but status may mean that you're a ministry leader or you're a leader in the sport, a head coach, a head high school football coach who thinks he's better than the rest, right? And I think it just goes back to I think being humble and humility is something that we want to teach the athletes, but we also have to live it as people,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes people don't stay humble. And that's where you get to judging. That's where people get to ostracizing people who may be just on a different part of their faith walk during that part of their time in their life.
Yeah, because to me too, it's like that's the time to have the conversation, right? Like I'll give you an example is one of the phrases that I use a lot and I got pushback on, but like not direct pushback. And this is where I want to go with the conversation is I always say it's like you are the creator of your life, right? Like again, kind
Mhm.
of that creator victim mentality. And there were some athletes is like, I'm not the creator, right? Like God is the creator. I'm like, okay, if you were to have a conversation with me, is like this is where I would go with it. Is like literally line 1 in the Bible said God created the heavens and the earth. And he also said he created you in his image. So if he's a creator and he created you in his image, to me, by definition, he's creating you to be a creator. Like,
Yeah.
and it's to the same point of like, I know I like joke about it, but it's the same. It's like you can't just pray and like sit there. Like you have to
Yeah.
go do, right? Like there is a part of like living behind it. But I don't know that people want to have those conversations. It's just like they go behind the scenes and they're like, Ryan said we're the creators and we're not the creators. He's so full of it. I'm
Yeah,
like,
I
but like,
like, I understand. I fully understand where you're coming from because for me, it's like God created the trees, God created water, right? But what did we take with trees, right? We say we want to see the table. Somebody got to build the table.
yeah, bam, I'm using that one too.
Somebody has to build the table. God didn't build the table for us. He gave us the trees. He gave us the resources. We still have to choose. And I was having a conversation with some close friends of mine last week about like God is such a loving God that, and I love this in any industries because we all have the freedom of choice. He gave us the right to choose.
Right.
Now, whether we choose how to live and what we do, He'll give us the guidance, He'll give us the direction, but it's still up to us as human beings to choose. I love choice
Yes.
because choices is how we end up to moving and elevating our lives. Now, we can't control everything. So when we're
Right.
talking about, we are not in control of everything, but we are in control of our choices.
Yes.
And so even if it is, well, somebody's been through some traumatic experiences and playing, whether it's playing football, whether it's playing other sports, and so they react all the time. Well, they still have a choice. When somebody presents them with a resource, they have a choice to say, well, am I going to use this resource or am I not? So
Yeah.
for me, am I going to build the table or am I not? Am I
Yeah.
going to go take this
Yeah.
water? Am I going to take this water and make pasta? Right? We still need it is he has given us resources that has allowed us to make choices to then move forward in life. We talk about you can't be a steward over anything if you don't choose. Being a good steward means you're choosing to do right by what you have.
And that's good. That's really good. I like that example too. Because I'm always like needing like other examples. Because like I'm always down to have the conversations, right? But I think that that's like the hard part for a lot of people. And to me, it just goes to show if you're not willing to have the conversation, you probably not aren't confident enough to like you don't have enough like I don't want to say data, that's not the thing, but like enough, like you haven't studied well, you don't understand it enough to have that conversation, right? Because like there's certain things it's like I know what I can talk about. And there's other things like if we start talking politics, I'm changing the subject because I don't know enough about it, right?
Right.
Like I just like I can't like as somebody that like watches it and like studies it and like this person and they're like I'm lost because I don't study that, right? Like I can't carry on that type of conversation. So I'm not going to try to argue with somebody because I just genuinely don't know. Right. And so I think that like to me, I guess that's the way that like I think of it is like, well, like that should be the key sign, right? Like that, like maybe I should dive deeper into better understanding. And then to me, it's like we talk about growth too, and we talk about like identity and like growing you as a person. It's like that is a primary way of growing is to see the other side of the equation and listen, right? Like, it's like that's because if you just hang around people that think like you and talk like you and act like you, then you're probably not going to grow all that much.
Yeah, that's real.
it's
That's
it's
real.
it's exposure to it.
But also not just that, I think it's crazy. We're working in the world of performance, but in the world of performance, you have to learn how to suffer,
Right.
right? Right. You don't put yourself through rigorous training and not feel like you're suffering. Now it may get to a place where you don't feel like it anymore. Was a point in time where that workout it hurt. Them lifting those weights, getting to that new max, it hurt. That running that extra mile, that running or that extra play to get over, that running through contact, like yes, your body has built some type of a callus and some type of armor, but at a point in time, you didn't have this armor. You
Yeah.
had to go through some type of suffering. You had to go through some type of hardship to grow to get strong. That's what weightlifting is. It is breaking down the muscle to then
Correct.
grow the fat. Right? For any athlete, whether it's muscle memory, you don't have to be strong. You don't have to lift weights like a football player. You still have to go through your own version of suffering. Right? Consistency requires that. And I think from a faith standpoint, it talks about in Romans 5, it's like that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance
Mhm.
produces character. Character produces hope, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
we look at the athletics and it's like, what do we want our athletes to do? First, we put them through put them through training regimens. And then we want them to persevere through it because that allows them to grow together as a team, allows them to realize that they can overcome, they can be down 21 points and still come back. That's that perseverance. Then it's the character. It's being able to know that no matter the circumstance, this is who we are and this is how we show up.
Yeah.
And then even when we're down, we still have hope that we can continue to beat even the Goliaths, even the people that they say we can't beat. That's why people love a good underdog story. That is
Yeah.
hope right there and there.
Yeah. 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 I love it. I love it. All right. So, kind of a side note question
Yep.
because you're married, right?
Yes, married.
How careful do you have to be to not be a coach at home?
Ooh, great question. Oh my God, that is a great question. That is,
Because it's the first thing, just as we like
yeah,
converse back and forth, is like, I'm like, ah, man, I'm gonna go home and like continue this conversation. I'm
yeah,
like, probably
no,
not, probably
yeah,
not.
no. I learned a lot. I learned how that my wife is not my career. My wife is not my uh the personal development project. My wife is not that. And it takes a while because some things that we learn, some things that I get exposed to at work, I love to share. But it's I should be sharing it, not trying to just have a session at home and then
Right.
not influence and control my wife, right? So I early on in my career, I got exposed to a lot of different things. Got exposed to financial education. I got exposed to emotional intelligence, and had to realize like I love my wife and I love her for who she is, and that she's going to grow at the pace that God has called her to grow. But it's not for me to try to control her growth. I should be able to lead, and I should be able to be a light, but at the end of the day, being coming home is it's a home for both of us, not just a home for me.
Yeah, yeah. I just think about like even like if my wife says something, I'm like, ooh, I read something about that the other day. Then I'm like, no, that was not gonna go over well. I'll just save that. I'm like, yeah, let's
Yeah.
talk about
But
that.
I think it is very unique because I think between me and her versus, and we now have our first child on the way in June.
Oh, on the way. Oh
On
man,
the way.
congrats.
So it's been a great, thank you very much. As we are preparing to be parents, right? Has allowed us to have certain conversations about just our parenting, how we will look to raise a child. And these are things we had before conversations we had before, but now that it's like almost game time,
Is
it's like,
here.
okay, like what are we doing to teach finances within the house, right? We got to be on the same page. So it does take us having some of those conversations. And so maybe some things at work that I learned, but if we're not on the same page, we're not gonna go that route. Like it's getting us on the same page and then us taking action together. So for me, I want to have a unified front for the next 45 years, 60 years of my life. However long I'm alive, that's how long I want to be with my wife.
Yeah.
And so for me, that takes us coming to a unified ground and then being able to know that this is what we're going to do as a family to move forward. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
learned really quickly, being in a marriage, that it's not always about being right, right? It's not, and sometimes in this industry, we have to be right. But in
Yeah.
relationships, it ain't about being right. Do you want to be right or do you want to be in relation?
Yeah. You will sleep on the couch, you will sleep in bed.
So learning to that it's not always about being right, being logistical, being that thought as far as going through your mind and being so logical all the time. It's like I go back to it, say we're feeling beings. So sometimes we do have to allow each side to express how we feel, even if we need to go a different direction. So
Yeah, yeah. And it's like it's similar, but like even a more like powerful example of like even if you try to like I would use a silly example of like you hear something, you like, oh, like you should read this book. Like it explains like all that, like and just learn it like for yourself. It's like they have to like figure that out kind of like on their own a little
yeah,
bit. You know what I'm saying? And so yeah, I learned that was like me because I was especially like I'm still very, very, very like avid reader, like Sundays, Barnes and Noble. That's kind of a nerd, right? Like, but like even more so like early on, like starting and building businesses and things like that, it was just like it was like a deep obsession. And so it was like almost like every time I was like, oh, like wanting to like push the narrative, so to speak, on like the things I was reading. But like at the end of the day, it's like she sees me reading those and asks me what they're about, and I'll say, but if she doesn't pick it up, then she doesn't have an interest, right? Like I
yeah,
can't be like, dude, you have to read this book.
yeah, yeah,
Because it's the same. I'll give you a great example with athletes is for I started these little like early on, which kind of like led me to this path of like mentorship programs within our facility, right? And so it was kind of like our premier thing, right? Like you got like the and so like we worked on them with like reading and understanding and just all the things, right? And so I was like, why do like none of these kids like this is like the most powerful book on the planet? Like, why would this kid not read this book? Like, what the hell am I doing? And so I fast forward to when I started another facility in Dallas. And so what I would do in almost like I'd say 30 or 40% of the time is if I saw someone pull up and I was sitting at my desk, I would just grab a book and open it up and pretend like I was reading. And so like all the time they were just passing by and like see me reading because like as you'd come through, you'd see me in my office. And so then they would like go in the gym. And so like it dawned on me is some of the parents they were like did you tell Cass that like she should like start reading? I was like, no. They're like, she literally asked me for money so she'd go to Barnes and Noble. She bought like 3 books yesterday, right? And I was like, "Ugh," like right. It was the
Yeah.
concept of like, oh man, like I see them doing this, kind of like raising kids, right? Like they
Yeah.
see you do those things, and that makes it more powerful than like read this book right now.
Yep. Because now when we try to force it on somebody, control somebody, it's not them owning that choice. And that's it. I love the power of choice because if influence is important, and I do think that we do have to influence the right way, but influence should get to a place where it's not coercion, it's not control, it's just influence. And then influence can lead people to choosing the right choices for themselves that then gets them to own their own life, own their own development, and own also the consequences that come from the choices, both good and bad. So um,
Yeah. And that builds actually man, I'm on a Tony Robbins kick today. Is there was he was talking about the power of influence and so this helped me the first meeting I have with teams is I call it like my backstory, right? Because they
mhm.
don't care about learning anything from me. They have no idea who I am. And so it's like I have to build the connection. And so where a lot of people make the mistake, in my opinion, is just like they come in and they're like, this is how great I am. I've held this national championship and I've done this and these gold medals, and they don't give a shit, right? First, I was like, dude, you guys were overwhelmed. I was depressed and suicidal in college. And like, I just tell these stories because bringing it back to Tony Robbins is I'll never forget. He said, if I want you to think about a story with your mom, I'm going to tell you a story about me with my mom.
Mhm.
Right. And so it's like I tell them my story of when I was in college, and now they're thinking about their experience in college.
Well,
And now there's the connection because they're like, oh, we were late. Right. I felt that last week. And so again, just thinking about influence and like how we tell stories and like bridge those gaps.
I
Like,
mean, before we even start our rookie development program, like the first day before I talk about what we do in player engagement, what's the things we got to cover, I tell them about me and why I do what I do, right? And so for me, it goes very similar. What's the journey? How did I end up to where I ended up? The game of football has brought me to so many different places I didn't even think I think it could bring me, right? Then outside of that, it's like for me, like my wife, my family, they're a big driver. And so for
yeah,
me, I put them up on the screen. I'm like, look, before we step into this building every day, I want y'all to know who I'm doing this for. Because y'all have y'all own family members that y'all do this for. Her and this little one, this is why I do what I do. These are the things I stand for. And I wholeheartedly mean that for me, my faith is the number one thing that drives me. My faith has allowed me to overcome so many adversity, so much adversity. And then for my faith, my family. My family has been there to support me. We have had our fun moments. We have had our memory moments. But for me, I know that no matter where I go, no matter what job I hold, that my family is what I want with me. And then from there, I talk about how important that service has been for my life. And so for me, I realized in my darkest moments that when I went out to serve others, that I realized my situation wasn't as bad as I think it was.
yeah,
And from there, I realized that I had an attitude of gratitude. And it was being able to just realize no matter what situation you're going to, what can you be grateful for, right? What can you be grateful for to pull you through? And at the very end of it all is that I want to make sure that no matter what I'm doing, is that I'm growing. Because all these other things that I talked about is that if I'm not growing, then I'm not serving these people, I'm not serving my family, and I'm not living out my faith if I'm not growing as an individual. And the crazy thing is those are my core values. So that's how I even break into before we get into the core value session. I tell them in that way that this is how I live, right? And because for me, that's what I want people, not people to see, but that's what they will see. And the last thing is like at the end of the day, like all five of these things matter, but my life, I want to have some fun too with it. So how
man,
can we
you
make
learn.
everything that we
Yeah.
do that with the way that we learn, the way that we serve, how can we make it fun? And that's kind of how I wrap it up. And so for me, it's not getting into content. It's more
Yeah.
so getting into the care, getting into the person, and then getting those other guys to feel comfortable as well. Like I can't expect them to open up and share with me if I'm not sharing my stuff.
Yeah, power of vulnerability, right? Like you and then it's like especially probably I don't know, you can give me your opinion on this, but like especially in the college world, it's like you got to get down on their level, right? It's like a kid,
Yeah,
right? Like you got to kneel down and get eye to eye with them to have the conversation. You can't hover over and be like, "Ugh," right? Like that's force, right?
yeah.
Coercion. That's um it's not going to work. And so it's, again, it's just meeting them where they are and understanding and knowing. And I think that that's the hardest part, especially in like the handful of like professional athletes that I've been fortunate enough to like be around is like they're just so misunderstood by 98% of the people, right? Like I'll never forget, it's like one athlete purchased something and everyone around me was like, I can't believe they bought that. I was like, have you ever had $50 million in the bank account? Because I haven't. So you can't tell me what you would do.
like,
Because that is like going to Zaxby's for me. Like, I mean,
like, what are we talking about? We're talking about somebody that's 21 years old, 22 years old. You're asking them to then act like your 40-year-old self, right? That's gonna be, oh my God, I can't believe I would never do that. You're saying that with the information that you have now, right? You're
correct.
saying that with all of your life experiences, you're saying with the things that you've been exposed to. That's now, right? Let's be real. At 21 years old, if you were not exposed to that information, you will go off of impulse, whatever your impulses are, unless you were taught differently. And I say that because you will go off impulses are reactions. And so,
Yeah.
unless you were taught to respond to these situations, to respond to this spend me live $50 million a little bit differently,
Yeah.
then we all gonna react the way our bodies and our minds want us to react with $50 million in our bank account.
This is a whole different yeah. I mean, it, you have to have experienced it, right? Like
Yeah,
you can't learn to ride a bike watching a YouTube video. You got to get on the bike and ride it. So you can't
yeah,
learn what you would do from watching a movie with $50 million until you've experienced it, right?
yeah.
Like that's just one of those things. It's like it's the same as like it's the armchair quarterback, right? Like the person that sits at home. It's like, well, I would have. I'm like, easy for you to say
Yeah.
because your livelihood is not on the line.
Your livelihood is not on the line. You also don't have to make a decision in 3.5 seconds, and you also don't have a 300-pound man running into your face while also you're trying to still see the backside post, right? What are we talking about? Like athletes, I believe athletes are geniuses, especially because in order for they get their bodies to react in a split second, you have to have some type of spatial awareness that not many people have. Spatial awareness is also a skill.
Dude, and like I feel like even getting athletes to understand that because sometimes they'll just be like I'm not as smart as them. I'm like, bro, if you can understand that damn playbook, like if you can understand all of them goddamn concepts, like bro, you are way smarter than you think you are, or giving yourself credit for.
Yes. You can process it in 25 seconds. You get the play, and then all of a sudden the safety moves over, and now you have to convert your route. Or all of a sudden you on the offensive line and somebody stunts, and you got to wait for somebody to come back. Like those are things that are so hard to teach, and it's a reason why they're professional athletes.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. It's mind blowing. Mind blowing. All right. We'll kind of like start to wrap it up. Last question.
Okay.
I didn't pre-frame you for this one, so get ready.
Okay.
If you're in a stadium with 100,000 people and you could only leave them with one message, what would it be?
Oh, simple. A candle doesn't lose its fire lighting another candle.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Simple as that. So no matter what industry you're in, no matter what you do, it's nothing to be a light to others, right? And so I think right now we are in a dark world at times,
Yeah.
and I think that more people who have a light, I would encourage them to light it and to light others. Like it's not about forcing that candle to be a big candle. You can light another one small candle.
Mhm.
You don't have to deal with the size. Just light it.
It's funny you say that. Is I actually was reminded this morning because sometimes like even in like what I'm doing too is like sometimes I get hesitant to like reach out or like ask somebody or like hey like I think I can make like an impact on your team or whatever it is. And like my mentor was like, Ryan, like, do you wholeheartedly believe if you got in front of somebody, like you would change their life if they were wanted to be coached by you, right? Like they wanted to be around you. I was like, absolutely. And he was like, well, you're doing them a disservice if you don't reach out. And I was like, damn, that is actually powerful, right? So it's like sharing your light like with
Yeah,
others. If you have it and you don't share it, it's kind of a disservice almost
yeah.
to a certain level. So yeah, I love that. I love that, man. Dude, this has been awesome. I appreciate the conversation.
Man, thank you very much for having me, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Until next time, everybody. Peace.